one community with one big lie has been destroyed. Imagine what every community will look like if Donald Trump is president. Every community will suffer like Springfield is suffering because it's all about Donald Trump, and he doesn't care at all, doesn't give a shit about what is left in his chaotic wake.
I'm Jessica Denson, host of Lights On with Jessica Denson, and I'm joined by Representative Eric Swalwell of this great state of California. As always, a pleasure to have you on Lights On. Welcome back to Lights On.
Thanks so much, Jessica. Excited to be back with you.
So I know nothing's going on in DC. I really appreciate your time today, but thank you. We'll see you next time.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Get back out to the absolute chaos that is there. We have a potential government shutdown that is kind of swirling around because Donald Trump wants to shut down the government, and of course, 40-ish days until the most consequential election. So yeah, it's crazy times. You're fully in it. I'm all in, and yeah, I've got work to do.
So let's just start there. Let's start with this new shutdown threat from your MAGA Republican colleagues. Of course, once again, we are dealing with this insanity of a convicted felon pulling their strings and calling the shots in the United States House of Representatives, where he is not a member of our government. Tell us the latest. You know, yesterday they tried to pass a stopgap funding bill, couldn't even get their act together, but in it, they're really trying to push this really dangerous Project 2025 sort of legislation, which is going to kick a lot of people off the voting rolls. Can you explain all of this?
Yeah, so you wouldn't know it by the craziness that happens on Capitol Hill and all the entertainers, you know, who think that their job is to come here and entertain for an audience of one, Donald Trump. But our real job, the job that we were sent to do, is to fund the government, because we just can't function as a community if the government isn't funded. Kids can't go to school, roads won't be paved, airplanes won't take off, we won't be safe, and our military won't defend our country if we don't fund the government. And these geniuses have only been able to fund the government just a couple months at a time. And so the government funding will run out at the end of this month if they don't do anything. They also are not very good at math, because Democrats control the White House, the Senate, and essentially the House of Representatives, because every major vote has relied upon Democratic votes to get anything done. But these MAGA Republicans think that they should be the ones that drive the policy agenda. And so they are saying that unless we require every American to go back and prove that they're a US citizen and essentially re-register to vote 40-ish days before the election, they're going to shut down the government. So Jessica, just so your viewers know, it is already illegal for a non-citizen to vote. It's already illegal.
Yeah.
But this is just a way for Donald Trump to make it harder for people to vote, because he got his ass kicked in the last election. He lost by millions of votes in the popular vote. And I think it was like a 70-ish electoral vote blowout that he suffered. And so from his perspective, he has to make fewer people vote. Otherwise, he can't be president. And so he's willing to shut down the government, shut down our lives, unless he gets his way.
Yeah, you were talking about it affecting airplanes. Something I will never forget, Rep. Swalwell, is when he had that tantrum in, 2019, shut down the government because he couldn't take a strong woman in Nancy Pelosi.
That's right.
And what was one of the consequences of that shutdown? The Boeing was not able to get a software update from the FAA. Another 737 MAX went down, killing hundreds of people. That's, to me, one of the more extreme examples of the very serious consequences.
Right. I also saw another example. Jose Andres, Chef Andres, opened up a food kitchen at the nation's capital so that federal workers who were missing their paychecks were offered free meals. Now, he typically does these as relief efforts in war zones, places suffering, flood damage from hurricanes, earthquakes, etc. But in the nation's capital, the greatest country in the world, Donald Trump shut down the government. Federal workers weren't paid. And we had an open food kitchen where hundreds of federal workers stood in line to be fed. And that's the chaos that Donald Trump has brought upon us in the past. That's what he wants to bring right now. And I think it's going to be rejected when voters go to the polls in just a couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's I know one of the voting blocks that's really out there being battled for from both the Harris campaign and the Trump campaign is the mail vote. And I got to tell you, I am in just like, where is your attention when I hear people say Donald Trump was an effective president or he got things done? And I saw a report on CNN the other day. They're interviewing some mail voters that are leaning Trump, and they're like, but he was effective. He was strong. This is such a misconception. Can you help us, help the American public, any male voters out there that are having some, maybe not remembering just how highly ineffective and weak the Trump presidency was. Can you remind us, give us some examples?
Yeah. So first, we can't assume that they will remember, and many of them didn't live through it. Folks who are just starting to vote now, young men, were not eligible to vote in many cases in the last election. It's also a generation, by the way, that suffered, I believe, the most through COVID. Young people, who were remotely learning and remotely graduating and remotely matriculating to college. They went through a lot. They had a different experience than you and I did during the formative times of our lives. And I promise you, they were not focused on day-to-day American politics at the time. So we can't just assume that they remember or even experience the worst consequences that they directly connected to Donald Trump. So
Good point.
What we need to remind them of is the biggest job creator in our lifetime has been the Biden-Harris administration. We need to remind them that if they go to college or if they're just out of college, the only person who has a plan to reduce their student loan debt is Kamala Harris. That if they were traumatized by the mass shooter lockdowns and the drills that they did in their classrooms, or if they knew somebody who was a victim of gun violence, the only person who has a plan for them to make sure no kid goes through that again is Kamala Harris. And if they believe that in America, your hard work adds up to doing better for yourself and dreaming bigger for the future, Kamala Harris has a plan that every first-time homeowner is going to have $25,000 to make it a little bit easier and more affordable to buy a house. And young men are going to live and suffer the consequences of the change in climate more than anyone who's lived before them. Any male that's lived before them, they're going to suffer the consequences more. And the person who has a plan to reduce those harms and do something about it is Kamala Harris. And so, yes, we have to first remind them Kamala has a plan, and then to also show that Donald Trump is only out for himself. He created, while running for president, this Trump social media company where if you invested $1,000 6 months ago, it's only worth a couple $100 today. So he's screwing his investors. He's created a cryptocurrency now just to grift from people because he's so cash strapped. Every policy that he puts in place is just to enact his grievance campaign. It's a meme presidency. It's all about Donald Trump always. It's cruel in the way that he carries out his policies to benefit himself. And it's memed. He's being laughed at across our country and across the world. And so young men should care about that. And I think Kamala Harris is making the case.
I hope so. Absolutely. Talking about cruelty and trauma, I will tell you, Rep. Swalwell, we do not mince words here on Lights On. Last week, I opened my show by calling Donald Trump and J.D. Vance domestic terrorists. And I am sorry, but sorry, not sorry. I spent 8 years of my life combating the real silencing and censorship of Donald J. Trump. And I will not be gaslit into being told that Donald Trump is being censored. So I will use words and peace and truth to warn our country of the stakes that we face. But we continue to have this MAGA ticket stoking terror and violence in real American communities. You mentioned mass shootings. I remember El Paso, which was one incident of stochastic terrorism inspired by Donald Trump's hatred and xenophobia against immigrants. We now have this almost daily bomb threat situation playing out in Springfield, Ohio, over verifiable lies that these two people at the top of a presidential ticket continue to spread. Can you just talk about the danger that these men pose to our country by just trying to score political points, stoking divisions based on lies?
Yeah. Every city in America will be Springfield, Ohio, if Donald Trump is elected again. Think about it. By spreading lies just to benefit himself and try and get elected so he can avoid criminal and civil penalties, Donald Trump has falsely accused Haitian immigrants who are in the United States legally of eating cats and dogs. It is crazy. But by making this false smear, he's destroyed the community. These Haitian immigrants are living in fear of their lives. Public buildings across Springfield, Ohio, are being shut down constantly because of bomb threats. A pastor spoke today that this has completely divided the community, not just the Haitian American immigrant community, but it's turned neighbors against each other. It's hurting businesses in Springfield. That is a microcosm of what will happen if we allow Donald Trump to be president of all America. One community with one big lie has been destroyed. Imagine what every community will look like if Donald Trump is president. Every community will suffer like Springfield is suffering because it's all about Donald Trump, and he doesn't care at all, doesn't give a shit about what is left in his chaotic wake.
No, he does not. Didn't plan on it at this moment, Rep. Swalwell, but when you're talking about someone who doesn't give a shit about anything but their own political survival, I cannot help but think about someone who we spoke about last time you were here, and that's Benjamin Netanyahu, and the suffering that the Israeli people and the Palestinian people continue to endure. You and I talked about how Netanyahu is very much like a Trump figure. And, we've dealt with this situation for months now where I think a lot of people are dismayed by the U.S. continuing to put our money behind offensive weapons. We are all for Israeli security and defense. And I think, I saw a story in Haaretz last week about how even it feels like sometimes Americans are not supporting Israelis who are against Netanyahu because they themselves are flooding the streets of Tel Aviv every weekend demanding a ceasefire and a hostage deal. They know how corrupt Benjamin Netanyahu is. But I know that Senator Sanders is working up a bill to halt the continuing aid or selling of weapons of offensive weaponry to Israel. The United States has a place, has a role. We have the greatest leverage in this equation. Isn't it time for us to put our foot down when it comes to standing up for international law and really using our leverage, not just diplomacy, which with a bad faith actor like Netanyahu is clearly not working, to bring this war to an end?
No president in my lifetime has effectively advocated America's values and interests in the Middle East better than Joe Biden. In fact, he did halt shipments of ammunition earlier in this conflict. And I believe that we need to make sure that Prime Minister Netanyahu is acting in the interests of Israel and the United States, and most importantly, to get those hostages home as soon as possible. The villain in this story is Hamas. However, Prime Minister Netanyahu has very recklessly prosecuted this war. He's done it incredibly recklessly, and I believe that we will see in a President Harris, again, somebody who will work every day to help get these hostages home if, God forbid, they're not home. to make sure that we have a two-state solution, and that the prime minister understand that when it comes to the Middle East, that is our priority, is to make sure that Israel can defend itself and that we have a two-state solution. And we want to see what concrete steps an Israeli prime minister is taking toward that two-state solution. But stepping back just a bit, what I believe the evidence has shown with Prime Minister Netanyahu is that he focused a lot early on in this most recent term of his on supporting settlers in the West Bank and diverting resources of the IDF that should have been in Gaza to the West Bank so that settlers could commit violence and expand and build upon their settlements, and took his eye off the ball in Gaza. And in fact, I believe a intel chief recently resigned because of that. And the fact is, the buck should stop with the prime minister, that resources were diverted to go to the West Bank. And when you compare that to what could happen in America if you had Donald Trump elected, somebody who's going to be so focused on prosecuting his grievances, going after his political rivals, how vulnerable would we be to an enemy of America attacking us? And so you almost have a cautionary tale in what Prime Minister Netanyahu has done there. I also think about, young Palestinians and, the hopes and dreams they have, to live free from Hamas, but also have their own peace and security and opportunity. And when I compare the two candidates in this race, and I say this to my, Muslim constituents and friends across the country, only one candidate will give any hope for that young Palestinian, and that is Kamala Harris. She is capable of defending Israel, from terror, but also helping pave that way to a two-state solution.
Yeah, I mean, we can just be crystal clear about this. I mean, a Donald Trump administration would be all for just, finishing the job, as he has said, in Gaza and turning it into a golf course where Jared can sell beachfront condos. So let's be, transparent about that. But, you're talking about his Netanyahu's diversion of attention to the West Bank. He also funneled, suitcases with millions of dollars to Hamas. And who was encouraging Netanyahu to do this, to allow the Qataris to transfer millions of dollars to Hamas? Well, in 2018, it was Donald Trump's very own Steve Mnuchin who gave that green light. So all of these people are complicit. Senator, our Representative Swalwell, I had a son of one of the victims of October 7th on months ago, and he is working tirelessly for peace. And you know what he said to me? He said, Hamas and Netanyahu are in coalition. And I agree with what you said. None of the people here are not the villains. The Palestinians are not the villains. The Israelis are not the villains. It's the corrupt leaders like Sinwar and Netanyahu, and God forbid for us in our country, again, a Donald Trump who would try to.
I would only say, Jessica, I will not know, I hope, ever what it feels like to be, a family member of somebody held captive there. I don't agree with much of the way Prime Minister Netanyahu has prosecuted this war. I would just say that I do believe that Hamas is in a league of its own as far as how evil they are. I just happen to think that Netanyahu has recklessly prosecuted this conflict. I don't believe he's done enough to get the hostages home. And I believe President Harris will do everything she can to see an end to Hamas, a return of the hostages, and a two-state solution. And that's best for Israelis and Palestinians in the region.
Yeah, we all, I think, take it at face value. Hamas is a terrorist organization. I just want to get one more thought, because the stoking of divisions here is really so ugly, and it got really ugly yesterday. And with your colleagues in the Senate, there was a hearing on violence, against ethnic groups. And this Arab American leader was brought in and berated by Senator Kennedy, who tried to push her into saying that she supported Hamas and supported Hezbollah, which she repeatedly said that she did not. And after berating her, his last words to her were, "You should hide your head in a bag." you should hide your head in a bag.
It was disgusting. And I represent one of the largest Muslim American communities outside of Detroit. It was disgusting. It was disgraceful what Senator Kennedy said. He wasn't even listening to her. I mean, he asked a question as if he really wanted to listen to the answer, and she was condemning Hamas. And again, he just wanted to project upon her his own ugly stereotypes about Muslim Americans. And that's what's so frustrating with this conflict, is that an extreme view like that is allowed into this debate. This is an awful, awful conflict. What Hamas did was evil and awful. Full stop. No innocent Palestinian should be killed. Full stop. Everyone in the region has a responsibility to work toward getting the hostages back and finding a two-state solution. Full stop. If you can't be a part of that conversation, you're just contributing to more chaos, and you're bringing upon Muslim Americans stereotypes and, frankly, violence. And the same thing to anyone that, would take views that are anti the government of Israel, which is okay to criticize the government of Israel, but would also morph that into anti-Semitic views about Jewish persons. And so, again, it's just irresponsible and disgraceful what the senator did, and it's only going to bring violence upon more Muslim Americans.
100%. I know your time is short today, and I appreciate Representative Swalwell, you coming onto Lights On and being willing to tackle tough stuff.
No, that's your job. Really... my job too.
I know you got to go. I just want you to give our viewers 30 seconds worth of what House races we really need to focus on, because keep winning back the House is so vital.
Yeah, Will Rollins, and did I mention Will Rollins? Okay. This is a community that has one of the largest gay American populations in the country. It has somebody who has voted against the Equality Act, who's voted against same-sex marriages as its Republican MAGA congressman right now. Will is a former federal prosecutor from the community, for the community. I promise you this, I'll make this prediction right now. If Will Rollins goes to Congress, Hakeem Jeffries will be Speaker of the House.
We're all here for it. Will Rollins in the great state of California, right?
That's right. That's
exactly all right. Right in California and New York, two very blue states. We're counting on you. Thank you so much, as always, for joining us here on Lights On. Such a pleasure. As always, you can find Lights On wherever you get your audio podcast by searching for Lights On with Jessica Denson, and by subscribing to the Jessica Denson YouTube channel. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Take care.